BSG have changed the armor system a lot, so today we're going to update the tier list to reflect those changes. Now I do want to say that if you haven't watched my previous video on the mechanics of why I think, for example, the Ars Armor CPC Mod 1 is the best armor in the game, then this one might not make quite as much sense, so I do think you should go and watch that first before we delve into the reasons why I think each armor goes where it goes. With that aside, let's just jump straight in. So we're going to start at the bottom with these lot here. Now I've grouped up all of the armors together because now that the hitboxes are very similar for all the different armor types, it actually makes it very slightly easier to analyze them. Down in the F category, we've got the Module 3M, the Packer Rivals version, which is now exactly the same. It used to be heavier, but now it's exactly the same weight. And the 6B2 Flora. These things all go down here because they are soft armor, they are class 2 only, and they're not going to protect you against much except scav buckshot and a bit of pistols. Now, there are a couple of other armors that I put into this category as well. This is the 6B5 Ulay, which is very slightly better than these because it has class 3 armor at the front of the rig, except it has class 2 armor on the back, which is kind of the problem. It's class 2 around the neck and class 3 on the front, but class 2 at the back. So if you get shot at the back, it's like wearing these, but it is very slightly better than these other couple here. But I still think it goes into F category because it's soft armor only. The Kurakulon is a small step up, and that's class 3 all over, and the same with the Untar. These are quite heavy though, so I don't really recommend using them. They're not that great, which is the reason why the DRD, which is the final armor of this kind of soft category, I actually am going to put into E because it is very light and it gives you class 3 across the entire rig. Well, I've got this big chart here, which we're going to be pulling across and having a look at each time as well. And down here, we've got the DRD Packer, and this one is only 4 kilograms. So it's very, very light. If you want just to throw something on to stop you getting scavved, then that is not a bad idea. Carrying on with the last couple of soft armors, we have the 6B3TM. This is going into E tier because it has class 4 across the front, which actually isn't too bad. Maybe E is very slightly too harsh, but you only have class 4 on the front. The neck is non-existent, so you don't get protection there at all. And the back of the 6B3TM is class 2, which is the reason why I've put it in here. Same goes for the Ulay. I actually don't think this one is too bad, really. It's class 4 across everything, but the reason why this isn't very good will become apparent soon when we talk about the mechanics, because this type of armor, where it's got soft armor everywhere, or at least everywhere that soft armor is present on the PMC's body at least, that being class 4 is really not as big of a deal as it used to be, because the plate used to be very small on the chest, and everything outside of that was soft armor at class 3 at best, using the replaceable plate type armors. But with this one, it used to be class 4 right to the edge, but now the plate goes right to the edge, it's not as much use anymore. It's also quite heavy as well, so it's not like it gets pushed up into a better category because of its, its extreme nimbleness, and the internal rig is quite small on this guy too. Now, next up in the chain, we have these plate carriers, starting with the Tasmanian Tiger SK. This type don't have any soft armor at all, but they do have plates. So you have the front and back plate. This used to mean that they totally sucked because, as we talked about previously, we've got the plate that sits in the middle of your front and the middle of your back, but now that is extended all the way out, it's practically impossible to shoot to the thorax without going through the plate anymore. So no more random shots from the front, and the front plate also goes kind of around parts of the side as well, which we'll look at in a moment. But there's quite a few in this particular category. There's the Eagle Allied MBS-S, we've got the Hex Grid, the HPC, and then also this one as well, which is the S&S Precision plate frame, which is the one that the Goons have, and this is the big pipe version. None of these have any soft armor at all, although I will point out that they are a lot better than they used to be, because obviously you can get up to class 5 and 6 in here depending on what plate you put inside, and now when somebody shoots into your thorax hitbox, that is almost completely protected from bullets no matter where you get hit on the upper part of the body. And this is important because if we think about the old armor system versus the new armor system, even the best armors in the old armor system were maybe a 3 and a 4, and we were talking about the differences between armors that are a 2 up to a 4 out of 10. The new armor system, even the worst armors, like these plate carriers with no soft, are somewhere up at a 6 or a 7, because now you have to go through class 5. Before, you could shoot into class nothing and you just kill somebody, whereas now you have to get through class 4, 5, 6, depending on what plate you've got in, so it's a significant buff to some of these rigs. However, there are better armors that we can wear, which is the reason why I've still got them down here. They are nice and light, so if you're looking for light armors, I think there are better alternatives, again, further up the chain, but if you're looking for something really light, then these can actually be quite good. If I bring across our little list here, this is this particular branch here. You can see there's like no on soft armor on all of these, but they've got very low debuffs, and something like the Hex Attack is only half a kilo. So if you did want to pick something purely for weight, you'll want a sniping rig or something, then Hex Attack HPC is probably not a bad idea. It can be okay. The only thing to note is that out of this category, the plate frame is actually very slightly better than the others because it can take side plates as well. Still no soft armor, but you can take side plates. So you can technically have class 6 pretty much all around your top using the plate frame, and you will be protected pretty well because of that. So on to the next tier. This is into the C tier, and the first one here we have is the OTV Interceptor. The reason why these are going into C is that they have class 2 soft armor on the thorax and the back at its very least, as well as the ability to insert replaceable plates on the front and the back as well. So that means that when you get shot in the chest from the front, a bullet has to travel through the class 5 plate first and then through the class 2 armor underneath before it can kill you. And that can make a difference in certain cases. It depends on exactly which bullet, but it just increases your survivability a little bit. The OTV is the heaviest of this type, but at 3.8 base, it's not actually too bad. And then we've got something like the 6B23-1, which is the armor that you get right at the beginning of the game. This isn't too bad and is very similar to the 6B23-2 as well. These take the Karun style front plate and a specific back plate. So one of the disadvantages about these armors is that they can be a little bit of a pain to move up into the topper echelons of armor. For example, the class 6, you can't actually buy the front plate for this at the moment, which is quite a big disadvantage, I would say, on this type of plate carrier. But if you're looking for something cheap, then it can be okay. These also have groin and neck protection as well. They have groin at the back, so the buttocks hitbox, as well as neck protection, which can be okay against scavs if you're worried about getting buckshotted. But to be honest, it's something that I kind of deprioritize personally, because I would rather be protected against players in a more effective way on the thorax hitbox than try to worry about class 2 or class 3 around the neck. Because every time I die these days, it's M855A1, it's 56A1, it's CBJ out of an MCX, or it's M62 out of something like an MDR. And so I was going to die anyway to the neck, and so I've kind of deprioritized that, but that becomes more important at the beginning of a wipe. So onto the Cuirassier. This is very similar. The advantage of the Cuirassier is that you can use Western style plates the same as the OTV. You do get class 2 around the neck, so it's okay. And you get the class 2 soft armor as well behind the plate, which is pretty decent. This guy here, the 6B13, a bit similar to these. It uses the diamond shaped plate rather than the Corund plate, which again is a little bit tricky to get your hands on the class 6 version, but as a throwaway cheap armor, it's not too bad. Now, what differentiates these armors from the next set, which I am still going to throw into the C tier because there are better things that we can use further up the grid, is that they don't have any side protection. So this is just a little strap. There's no armor around there. There's no soft armor. You can't put any plates in or anything like that, which is a little bit of a shame. And so the next set you actually can. This next one is the Osprey, but this is the Osprey Assault. So this is the class 2 version of the Osprey, not the meta Osprey. And this gives you the ability to put in side plates as well as having soft armor. So you have class 2 soft armor around the outsides of the Osprey Assault, whereas you don't get that on these. You do sacrifice about another 3 kilograms. This thing starts at about 6.5 kilos, which is quite heavy, but you also get the arms as well. The arms is something, again, it's something that I don't prioritize that much. It's the first one with arms armor that we've seen here. I don't mind it if you can get it for free, but if it's going to be more expensive and you're going to have that at the cost of something protecting the thorax, then I'm not really going to choose it. These days you have to have well above 50 pen to go through the arm and into the thorax, and most people aren't using bullets like that. We'll have to see now that this armor change has come in whether people will, but you really have to be using things like BS, Golnik, that kind of stuff before you're really able to go through the arm and into the chest. Ammo like M61 is just really hard to get hold of these days, and we just don't see it all that much. Either way, this is decent. You can get all-round protection on this, and the only place that you are a little bit vulnerable on these is underneath the arm. The way that they change the hitboxes, as you'll have seen in my previous video, is that you now do have front plate all around the arms, and so you can't be armpitted anymore. But the thing about these armors is that they don't have any soft armor underneath the sides. So you're just relying on the front plate on its own, which can make a bit of a difference. You've only got class 2 soft armor on the front and the back. So this is very similar to the ANA Tactical M1 rig. This one doesn't give you any special protection outside of front and back, but you get side plates. Same thing with the Eclipse. This one gives you groin as well, but no neck again. And then you've got the Juk 3, which doesn't give you groin, does give you neck at class 2. You can put side plates in it. It gives you soft side protection as well as front and back. The Juk has a small downside, again, a little bit like some of these other armors where you can only put in certain particular ones. This one takes the diamond shaped plate as well. And so it's harder to get this up to the top tier of class 6. You can't just buy those plates from the traders. So it's going to sit in this category. Final one I'm going to put in here, which some people might disagree with me on, is the Corund. The Corund, for all intents and purposes, is not really much different to these armors. It has class 2 underneath. You do get neck protection, but again, it's at class 2. You do get groin and buttocks, but again, it's at class 2. And the plate is a little bit of a pain. The Corund VM, which is the class 5 that it comes with, it's very difficult to upgrade that to a Corund VMK, which is the class 6 version, because it's not purchasable. You either have to find an armor that has it in by default, which I'm not sure if even any of them do actually, or you have to go to somewhere like Kibba to try and find it there. It's pretty rare, and so it does make it slightly more awkward to run at the top tier. Now, next up, into the B tier, I'm going to put the TV110. So the TV110 has class 2 soft armor. It has front and back protection, but no sides. Why would I put this above the Korund, you ask? Well, the reason for this is because of the way that the armor hitboxes have changed. So the TV110, what used to make it bad was that the soft armor on it is precisely behind the front plate. When the front plate was smaller than the thorax, this meant that you were unprotected at the edges of the chest and could get killed with any bullet around the outside because you didn't actually have soft armor there at all. With BSG's change that they've made, the front plate now goes across the entirety of the thorax hitbox, pretty much. For practical purposes, let's just say it goes across everything. But because of the way that this is then coded with the soft armor follows the front plate and also gives you soft armor under the arms in the armpit region on the sides of the thorax. You don't get this with the Korund, and I personally will give up the class 2 neck protection and the class 2 groin protection and the side protection as well for the ability to have class 2 soft armor under my thorax. If my stomach gets blacked out, it doesn't actually matter. If my thorax gets blacked out, I will die. And so that's the reason why I've put this and other similar armors in this particular category. You can go to Tarkov and you can see, we'll actually do this right now. Let's go to the TV110 and I'll show you how you tell exactly that this is what it's doing. If you go into armor areas and it says front plate, back plate, it doesn't say thorax and it doesn't say back, but it does have a piece of chest aramid. It means that this chest aramid is assigned to the front plate and the back plate hitbox, which now extends all the way around the arm. If we go to the Korund, this is not the case. The Korund itself does have front plate, back plate, but it's got all these other armor areas, and it has thorax, as you can see, second down on the list, and it has upper back, which is fourth down on the list, and that is where this piece of armor and this piece of armor is set. So the chest armor there applies to the front of the thorax, and the back here applies to the back there. Underneath the arm and around the arm, this hitbox here, which is also thorax for damage purposes, doesn't have any soft armor under it, whereas on the TV110, it does. There's lots of people who are very confused about this at the moment. The front plate extends all the way around here, and because the soft armor follows the front plate, the soft armor is underneath here on the TV110. You have soft armor around the front, around the sides, the back, and here. So you have front plate and soft armor all over the thorax. You have 5+2, as opposed to the Korund, say you had a class 5 in it, it's just class 5 on its own underneath the armpit. And that's why I think it matters. I have lots of people ask me about the Osprey. The Osprey is the same. So the Osprey has, and we've jumped slightly forward to the protection one, but it doesn't matter which one you pick. This one has front plate, back plate, and a plethora of other armor areas, which means that the chest is only protecting this section and this section, not under the armpit. You have to pick an armored rig that specifically has only front plate and back plate as it corresponds to, the torso pieces, like the TV110, to make that work. Now, there's a couple of armors in this category. The TV110 and the TV115 are actually both like this, but they don't have any side protection. So they're not my favorites in this category. The ones that do have side protection are the Strandhog, the Banshee, the MMAC, which used to be one of my favorite armors, and the A18 Skander, which is something that we've just never really used. These rigs are also pretty decent for space, the A18 in particular being pretty crazy, and the Strandhog is quite nice as well, as is the TV110. The TV115 is a bit more of a budget rig. It's the one that you find on rogues and that kind of thing usually, so I don't really recommend using that, but all of these are actually solid choices now because you're protected by class 5 or class 6 plus class 2 underneath. Another advantage of all of these is they use SAPI plates, so you can go and buy SAPI plates from the traders. There's a class 6 SAPI plate that you can get hold of from Ragman for a SAS drive these days. So if you do want class 6 all over the top, then you can do it with these armors, albeit with class 2 underneath, which is why they're in B. Moving on, we now go into the class 3 soft armors. This is going to go into A. People always accuse me of putting the Trooper too highly, and I feel that maybe this time it is justified. So the Trooper isn't one of these type of armors, unfortunately. It is a regular thorax, so it doesn't have the soft armor underneath the plate, which means that the sides you are still exposed slightly. It's just the plate there and no soft. But the advantage of the Trooper is that you have class 3 soft protection. I feel like you should take class 3 soft on the front and the back, rather than taking class 2 around everything, because you're more likely to be shot at from the front. In a direct firefight, I'd rather have class 5 plus class 3 underneath than class 5 plus class 2 underneath, and the chance to get 5 and 2 on the side. It's a very, very minor detail, so the difference between B and A is almost non-existent these days. It's extremely close between these armors, and as I said, what we have to remember is that with all of these plate carriers, basically everything from D up to S, we're now talking from, these were 7 out of 10, and the ones in S are like a 9 out of 10. This is the difference. Previously, these were a 0 out of 10, and the S category were like a 3 out of 10. So the scale between the old armor system and the new armor system is really night and day. There's a couple of other armors in this category, like the Cry AVS, we've got the Defender, and we have the killer armor. None of these have the ability to put side plates in, although these two do actually have side protection. So the defender and the killer armor, you do get side protection on them. It's soft only, and there's no plates to be able to go in there. So none of these have plates at all, but some of the others that are just about to go through do. In this next category, we're talking about armors that have a class 3 soft underlayer and also allow you to put in plates as well. We are going to start in a slightly different place with the Zabralo, the Gen 4 Full, the Thor Integrated, and the Reduced T5. The unfortunate thing about these particular armors is they are very, very heavy. We're going to go back to our chart again, and we're going to have a look and see exactly what the problem with these guys is. And it's this one, and it's these three here. All of these have over an 8% move speed. The Thor Integrated and the Gen 4 Full is 8%, which is pretty bad. The Reduced T5 is minus 13%, and the Zabralo is minus 11.5%. And I just don't think that any type of armor increase on these justifies having that, because what we're talking about really these days is the plate protects you mostly, and then the soft armor is just there to catch and give you a bit of extra survivability against certain particular bullets. So I don't really care if I have arms, neck, groin, back of groin, whatever, if it's going to be class 3, because against players, as soon as people are using more than M855, anything around 30 pen or above, it's going to go straight through and it's going to kill you anyway. And all of these other non-critical parts, like the stomach and the arms, which are also difficult to penetrate through, like we said before, I'm just not as interested in defending against. So the Zabralo, I'm actually going to put it down in C, the same with the Gen 4 Full, and the Thor and the Reduced T5. They're just too heavy, they're too cumbersome. Even if you have high strength, it just doesn't really make sense to use these armors. We're going to continue to put some of these other ones up into the A tier because I think this is just about okay. The Gen 4 Assault is basically as far as I will go in this particular category. This has minus 5% move speed and is 8.2 kilos. So it's very heavy. For high strength users, it might just be about okay. And 5% move speed is about my limit as to where I'm kind of comfortable to use that armor and still feel like I can actually move around. Obviously, with the Gen 4 Assault, we do have the thorax protection. Again, so you don't have the class 3 protection underneath the armpit, but you do get neck protection and arms as well, which is kind of okay. This is similar in some ways to the Gen 4 Assault, so this is really just a categorization depending on whether you care about having arms or not, or whether you'd rather have groin and the buttocks instead, and whether you care about the weight. So the difference between those two is actually not that much. It's 7.9 for this one versus 8.3, but this one has arms and this one has groin and buttocks, so it's really up to you. I do think that the Reduced M is pretty good. The Reduced M is decent because it actually has quite limited debuffs. It's only minus 3, minus 4, and minus 3 with 7.7 on the weight. So it's a really heavy armor, but if you have the strength to support it, I think this one actually can be quite decent. I personally don't wear it that much because I have only got about 500, 600 raids this wipe, and my strength is not level 30 yet. And so I can't even really wear this guy. It just means I'm overweight in every single raid, which I don't really like. I don't like playing feeling like I'm overweight. But if you have a high strength, or maybe you're using stems or something, the Reduced M is actually really solid. What I do think is slightly better is the Osprey Protection. This is the class 5 version that comes with some class 5 plates by default. Normally I swap these out for the GAC plates because the tall comms that come in here are really, really heavy, and this thing already comes in at 6.9 kilos, so it's quite a heavy base because it's got this arm protection as well. But you do get neck and arms with this thing, which is cool. You can reduce the weight down using the GAC plates, and it is pretty good. This is one of the favored armors in the game. I could totally see why, and it is decent because the soft armor doesn't follow the plate specifically. You have it on the front and the back with class 3, but in most cases that's fine. So it's an A tier armor, it's totally okay to use, it's decent. This is a very similar story for the next couple. These are all fundamentally the same types of armor. The Bagari is here, easy to buy, class 5 by default, doesn't protect the neck, but it does have a nice storage space inside, although it is quite expensive. The Juk 6A, which is now called the Juk Digital, this one takes the diamond-shaped plates, so again, a little bit limited in terms of plating, but not too bad, and is very, very similar to a Gazelle. It just has very slightly more durability, but these two armors are almost identical. These are pretty much top tier these days. Same thing with the ANA M2. This thing has class 3 soft armor underneath thorax. It has side plate protection. It has side soft armor as well. You just don't get any neck with it, and the same with the Thor. I like the Thor. It's very, very light. This is probably the lightest of all of these armors. I think at its base, it is 1.7 kilos. You can see on my little chart. Let's just move my chart back over. All of these guys. This one is very, very, very light. The reason why the M2 is kind of equivalent to the Thor Concealable in many ways, despite being 600 grams heavier, is that you actually get a rig integrated with this thing already. Whereas with the Thor, you're going to have to go and buy a rig. And even the Thunderbolt, I think, is about 500 grams, so it ends up making them about the same. So in this category, it's really all about what type of protection you want, how heavy you want that armor to be, and whether you care about the neck protection or not. My current argument at the moment with people, a lot of people talking on stream about not having neck protection and stuff, and you're really only worried, as I said, about dying to scavs with the neck protection, because any player is just going to kill you through the class 3 armor. Maybe that's not the case early on in the wipe, so early on you might want to move over to something that does have neck protection, like a Karasa. Once you step up, maybe to a Gazelle or something, but in my opinion, the neck protection for defending against scavs really needs to be dealt with by your gameplay and avoiding getting shot in the face by scavs. You shouldn't really be getting killed by scavs, in my opinion. I don't feel like your armor choices should revolve around that. I think that if you are getting killed by scavs, you should either play it a little bit more cautiously or practice more against them so that they don't kill you. Right, moving on to the last set. So these armors here are the ones where you do have class 3 protection underneath the plate, and it's on the plate specifically, and so it follows the armor around underneath the armpits with class 3. These are the TacTech, the Tagilla Rig, and the Slick. The TacTech used to be a fan favorite, and it's actually not too bad on space. It doesn't have the best internal layout, but it's okay. It's 4x4, so it makes it kind of hard to steal. The Tagilla Rig is obviously only on Tagilla himself, which can be a little bit tricky to get, although you can buy these things on the flea now. And the Slick, there is a barter for Ragman for this thing, and it comes with class 6 plates too, which is quite cool. All of these guys can take the Western Sappy style plates, which again is really, really useful, and you know that you have near maximal protection using these, which is pretty interesting. The only thing about them is that they don't have side protection, you can't put any plates in them on the sides, and so your stomach is a bit more at risk. So here is where our final two come through. Here we have the Cry Precision CPC, and we also have the Ars Armor CPC Mod 1, which is now my new favorite armor in the entire game. And these two do protect the side with soft armor, and also you can put plates in these as well. So what that means is that in theory, you could put class 6 plate in the front and the back, class 6 plates in the sides, and when somebody shoots you in the thorax hitbox, they always have to go through the class 6 plate first, and the soft armor at class 3 underneath, no matter whether they shoot you from the front, from the back, or under the armpits, which, as I said a million times, isn't the case for a lot of these armors. You don't have class 2 soft protection underneath. The trade-off that you are making here is obviously no neck, no groin, no buttocks, no arms. You don't get any of these extra hitboxes, but you do get this extra thorax hitbox around in terms of soft protection. Now, there's one other compromise as well, which is that because the soft armor looks at the plate hitbox specifically, you actually miss the bottom half of the stomach too, because the plate hitbox only comes down halfway through the stomach. So if you get shot in the stomach area, but not quite in the groin on something like a killer armor, that will absorb it into the soft, whereas on a CPC Mod 1, that won't happen, because if it goes underneath the actual hitbox for the armor, it'll hit raw stomach without going through any soft armor at all. This can make you a little bit more vulnerable to things like buckshot and scav rounds with high flesh damage, but I will remind people that the stomach now only passes through 105% of its damage when it gets blacked to the rest of the body, which makes it not as big of a deal as back in the day when it used to pass through 150%. This used to be a lot. And you still do get half of the stomach. It's not that you get none of it, you get half of it. So that's the full rundown. The long and the short of it is, I wouldn't worry too much. It doesn't make that much difference what you're wearing, so long as you're wearing a decent plate. The thing that is the most important now is that the front plate is really good, because the front plate incorporates the entirety of the front and all the way around the arms and parts of the back, kind of from the sides too, which is very, very strange. So the back plate is a bit less important and the front plate is very important. I'm trying now, given that we're in the late stages of the wipe, to use a class 6 plate in the front and then a really light class 5 like the GAC plate in the back, and then use the side plates as well, because I think they are well worth using at this point if you have access to an armor that you can buy that allows you to put them in, like the CPC Mod 1, because it's very, very good, and it protects you a lot from random sprays from PMCs. I've defended against a ton more stuff since the armor update than before it. Armors used to come back pristine with the plates untouched, and now in most firefights, almost every plate has been shot once, including both side plates, which it does show that it is doing the job. So lastly, we're just going to look at a couple of stats to see what does this mean? Is it actually important? And we're going to use Tarkov Gunsmith, which is a very good way to simulate this. So go to tarkovgunsmith.com and then you click on the ballistic simulator up here. And in this, we're going to choose various pieces of ammo. Let's do M855A1 just to start with. And on the armor layers, let's go with a GAC plate, which is what I used to do all the benchmarking here. And then we'll add something else in here. Let's put in Ars Armor. And then from there, you can pick something. You can see this has got the Sappy front hit zone because it is actually part of the armor plate, as I've been saying. And this one here is the Ars Armor CPC mod plate carrier, and it's got the 40 Aramid. It comes up now as TacTech. I think it might be the same one between the two of them. And what you do is you either go single shot, and this shows you for the very first hit what the chance is for each layer and the damage, or you can press multi-shot. And this gives you some charts, which I tend not to look at too much. If you want to look at the charts, then typically I would look at the cumulative chance of kill, which is this one over here. But I normally just look at the table. So here, specific chance of kill. As you can see for shot 1, we have 0, 0, 0. You get 30% chance for the 4th hit, 42% chance for the 5th hit, 24% chance for the 6th hit, and then nothing after that because they're already dead. Cumulative chance to kill just adds these up as you go along. So by the 4th hit, they've got 33% likelihood of being killed, because this is just shooting into the thorax in this particular configuration, 75% after the 5th shot, and on the 6th shot they're almost certainly dead. Now I did this for a whole bunch of different ammos just to get an idea and a flavour of like what difference it actually makes, because I've just harped on at you for ages about why having 5+3 underneath the arm matters versus having 5+2 or 5+ nothing. So for M855A1, if you have class 5 with 3 underneath, the chance of dying at 3, 4 and 5 hits is 0, 33% and 75. With 2 underneath, with class 2, this goes to 7, 38 and 96. And with nothing underneath, it goes 8, 80, 99. So I think this 4th shot here shows you why it matters. Having class 3 versus class 2 doesn't actually make that much difference between these two. It does a little bit on the final shot, but on shot 4 doesn't matter that much. And it's probably because the 2 is preventing some of the damage while it goes through. Whereas naked, with just class 5 and nothing underneath it, you can see there's a massive difference. You're very likely to die on shot 4, whereas you're actually not very likely to die on shot 4 with the other 2 types of armor. Moving on to M62, which is a lot higher damage. In 2 shots, you die 14% of the time if you get an unlucky roll, 57 on 3 shots, 98% on 4 shots. So you're basically dead no matter what on the 4th shot with all of these different armor types. With 2, again, it's very similar, 15 and 62, but there's a big jump up on shot 3 for only having class 5 on its own. So if you get shot from the side and somebody manages to connect 3 shots of M62 with you from the side, you actually, 50-50, you might not die if you've got class 2 or class 3 underneath, but you certainly die if you've just got the front plate armor on its own underneath your arm. CBJ, this is for the MCX. This goes from 4 to 31 to 95% on 3, 4 and 5 hits. This is similar-ish for 2, but it actually makes a bit of difference because this is a little bit more punchy. You got 76% chance of dying versus 30%. And then for nothing underneath, you've got 35, 78 and 100. So this makes more difference actually between class 3 versus class 2, which is normally why I suggest having class 3 if you can, because depending on what you're fighting against, sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on what range of ammo you're fighting against. Hybrid, this is for the SIG Spear. This is an extremely good ammo. 38%, 82%, 98%. So you're not really defending against this, it's just going to kill you. With class 2 underneath, 40%, 83%, 99%. Again, makes hardly any difference. And with nothing underneath, 41 is the same, but you certainly die on shot 3. So sometimes you survive a hybrid on the 3rd shot with class 3 and class 2 underneath, whereas if you don't have it under there, you're definitely going to die. Going to something that's slightly lower power, M856A1, you go from shots 4 all the way up to shot 8, goes 0, 0, 1%, 42 and 98, that's with 5 and 3. 5 and 2, we go 0, 3, 19, 91, 100. So you actually die more often on 6 and 7 than you do with just 3. And this is because this ammo is a little bit lower in terms of its penetration, which means that the soft armor matters more because the damage mitigation from the soft armor is actually going to be greater after it's passed through class 5. When you're using some of these lower grade ammos against higher tier armors, it really comes down to durability and wear at that stage. So it'll probably take quite a lot more shots than this in reality because you're shooting a bit on the plate, a bit on the side, a bit on the back, some into the arm, some into the air. It'll actually feel like the TTK is insane. But then compare this to nothing underneath at all. Goes 5, 22%, 96%. So you're basically dead on shot 6, whereas this just isn't really the case with 5+3. You know, shot 6 versus shot 8, this makes a big difference, and it's 50-50 on shot 7. This is the reason why I think the armors with class 5 with class 3 underneath are the best, and that's the reason why I've stacked most of them up here. I think in total, in summary, the ordering should really go, can it take a front or back plate? Does it have soft armor? Does the soft cover thorax or plate? And you should pick plate if you can. What class is the soft armor? And pick 3 if you can. Can it take side plates? Obviously you pick the one that has side plates. And does it have soft armor on the side? If you use this kind of flowchart to work out what's good and what's bad, this is really the determination for what I decided. Outside of that, you've got other things like weight and some of the debuffs, but that really only matters, in my opinion, for those 4 armors that I downgraded from a higher tier because they're too heavy. Outside of that, you can probably manage it and you just have to play around with it and your strength. So the big final summary is use the AACPC, or maybe the TacTech. I hope you enjoyed the tier list. A big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.